Alright, so after making you suffer through 2 videos of, well, better thinkers than I, here is my first video on hell. I'm going to be reading some cue cards that I set up on the side just because it's all written out, so yeah, here we go. Christians and Muslims are very vocal about their beliefs and about their morality. This stands in stark contrast with Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, etc. But why? I think that one of the main reasons for this difference is the belief in hell. The main reason why Christians are, and should be, so incredibly vocal and, quite frankly, imposing with regards to telling people to be moral is because of their fear of those people going to hell. Now, there are only 2 things that immoral can mean in a Christian worldview. A, it will cause earthly suffering. B, it will cause people to suffer in hell. See my videos, Consequences Are All That Matter, and The Euthyphro Dilemma. In this video, I'm not going to focus on case A, because if that were the case for all of these morally vocal Christians, then none of them would be against homosexuality, evolution, contraception, blasphemy, and other things that aren't detrimental to society. If they really were interested in what's best for us here on Earth, well, they wouldn't be against these things in the first place. Additionally, they wouldn't have to involve their religion. If it's bad for society, we can determine that with a secular, scientific approach. But because many Christians still oppose these things, we can see that they aren't actually concerned with our earthly well-being. And these are the Christians I will be talking about. This means that the only remaining reason for these Christians to be so morally vocal and imposing is to keep people from going to hell. But many of these morally vocal Christians do not have an air of concern when they tell people that homosexuality is wrong, or when they tell people not to blaspheme. Rather, their words often come across as defensive, condescending, indignant, and sometimes downright hateful. They are not motivated by altruism, but by the vacuous idea that you just ought not do these things. See my video, Consequences Are All That Matter. This means that these morally vocal Christians are not motivated by the one thing that rationally should motivate them, the fear that others will end up in hell. In fact, many Christians, rather than fearing hell for others, actually seem to welcome it as a fair punishment for being immoral. How backwards is that? One example of this whole thing is the pro-life Christians. They think that we're killing babies. Interestingly enough, some of these Christians believe in the salvation of infants. That is, children who died too young to understand that they need a savior, they'll automatically go to heaven. And yet, these Christians are still pro-life. Why is that? In going to heaven, the babies are, in the words of William Lane Craig, the recipients of an infinite good.
Now, the more difficult problem is the children. How could God command that the children be killed because these are innocent? If you believe, as I do, in the salvation of infants or children who die, what that meant was that the death of these children meant their salvation. They were the recipients of an infinite good as a result of their earthly phase of life being terminated. The problem is that people look at this from a naturalistic perspective and think life ends at the grave.
So given that the babies are doing fine, you'd think that these pro-life Christians would be against abortion in order to protect the mothers and doctors from going to hell. But this never comes across. It's all about the babies who don't actually need their help. Another example is blasphemy. Christians who protest blasphemy don't seem to do so because of the altruistic fear that blasphemers will go to hell, but on the grounds that they don't like it or it's just something you ought not do. And in general, this is a very strange phenomenon where people not only seem to forget about the only thing that matters in a moral system, the consequences, but where they will even go so far as to welcome hell for immoral people instead of fearing it.